Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel Vigil, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
We got James Palmer in the building, kind of on your computer screen, on your phone screen, wherever you want to be. How are you, James? How was yesterday?
You're in. I'm good. I want to get in that open. How do I find my way into that open? And
I know we really, honestly, we need to redo it. It's been up for like that for so long. So we'll squeeze you in. Don't worry.
I'm just trying to produce the show now. Okay.
How's
it going? Good.
I'm good.
How are you? I'm stoked. Yeah.
Crazy day yesterday, not necessarily involving the Broncos, but just the rest of the NFL. And we'll talk Broncos, so don't get me wrong. But I think the biggest difference that I noticed between what the Broncos did yesterday and what all the other teams did was the Contenders went out there and did what they were supposed to do and go find the gaps that they needed to fill to hopefully help them win a Super Bowl. And the Broncos realized on Sunday, we're not that close to that. Let's stick with what we got and build from the draft, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And I would maybe just change one word because you're spot on. I would change like contenders to front runners. Usually the front runners are the ones that feel like they need to make a move to add a piece. We're right there. When it comes to shove at the end of the year, we'll see it. We saw it with one of the biggest ones ever involved Von Miller. When Von Miller went to the Rams, it pushed them over the edge. They needed a closer to close out games. And what did Vaughn do after the trade and through the playoffs and in the Super Bowl? Just closed out games and had sacks and pushed them over the hump. Like that's what like front runners are trying to do. Mm-hmm. You saw that with Kansas City. You saw it with Baltimore. You saw it with Washington. You saw it with Detroit, Minnesota. I would say the Pittsburgh Steelers were very aggressive into saying that we think we can get into that group with enough moves. I mean, that's more aggressive than we've seen Pittsburgh. But yeah, all of these teams are essentially the front runners, and you need a piece or two. Some of them weren't in that group before. Like Washington 3 weeks ago wasn't in that sort of thinking. Now at 7-2, Adam Peters was like, we are a legit contender / front runner. Let's make a massive move for Marshon Lattimore. Because it's interesting, the other two teams that were in on him, Kansas City, and Baltimore.
Yep.
Like all three teams, front runners.
The turn of just events from Washington to where they are now over the past couple of years, really even the last year, it's crazy. That's why when I saw that trade, I'm sitting there and I'm like, like I'm surprised Washington's in there. And then, you go and look what they've done this season. I'm like, of course they're in this conversation, right? Yeah. Like, everything seems to be going their way.
Yeah, a huge need that they had. I covered their game a few weeks ago, saw them in person. They need corner help. They banked on some young corners. It just hasn't worked out. And so they went out and they got a guy who, let's just say, Marshon Lattimore, fellow Buckeye, OH, is not what he was a few years ago.
Yep.
But there's some talk around the league, like him and Dennis Allen didn't get along real well, where all of the nagging injuries he's had, actual injuries. Will you see a healthier player in Washington? Potentially, you might. And, go out there and get out of a situation that's been a bit grim there and into a new situation with a coach like Dan Quinn, which, guys, I mean, this is a great report from Adam Schefter. Like, players were saying, can I get to Washington?
Wow.
That has not been the thinking in a million years. I've covered that team so many times in Washington, and it was like a dumpster fire under Dan Snyder. It was like an embarrassing place to work, whether you played football or not. It was terrible. Whether you work, whether you're a janitor or you work in the cafeteria, you just hated working there. Now, new ownership, Dan Quinn, it's a completely different world. And everything kind of changed. A quarterback can do that. We saw it a year before in Houston and DeMeco Ryans. Those two have changed another organization that had a terrible reputation into a really, really desirable spot. And you saw it from the free agents that they landed this past year. So things can change quickly. I think everybody in Denver wants to know if things can change quickly here. I think they're changing. I really do. I think this is a young team that is playing above and beyond what most expected as a whole. And I think Sean has them on the right track. I just think like Washington was that version on steroids.
Truthfully, right? Because you're looking at two rookie QBs and you're like, okay, what's the difference? Do you think if they would have somehow pulled off a win and beat the Ravens, that they would have been more aggressive at the trade deadline?
I think they might have been, Rachel, and I think that would have been kind of fool's gold. I think that would have been like, I see why they're going to be more aggressive. And then when the season played out, and this would just be a lot of, woulda, shoulda, coulda, or who,
For sure.
But like, I think you would have been like, nah, maybe we shouldn't have given up that draft capital. But like, nobody gave up a ton. You know what I mean? Like outside of the Washington trade, there weren't other. I mean, outside of Jerry Jones, yeesh, terrible. I mean, just I was like, I'm making calls all day yesterday. Beep, beep, beep. I'll put my phone up so you can see visuals. Beep, bop, boop, 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 and making calls. And and people are hitting me back, going like, "What is Jerry doing?" Like other executives on other teams are like, "What's he doing?" They should be sellers, B Jonathan Mingo for a fourth. Like that's essentially what. Like DeAndre Hopkins was traded for. Like I mean, he was a fifth that can become a fourth. Like it's mind blowing because a lot of people around the league thought they should be sellers. I understand he's on a rookie contract. You have other needs. That's the trade that everybody's just like,
what are we doing?
Like what? But back to Denver. Like I would say also they didn't ship anybody out really. That wasn't part of the like teams called on DJ Jones. The Niners called on DJ Jones to see if he could come back. Teams needed defensive tackle help. The Broncos defensive line's been great. They didn't fire sale anything. I think standing pat is essentially what they did outside of the Baron Browning move, which you saw the corresponding move with Jonathan Cooper, that they were able to like show their hand. Like this guy's a big part of our future. This guy's probably not a part of our future. I am curious what Baron Browning does with Jonathan, because Gannon does really well with edge rushers, and he's got a lot of talent, and he's a good dude, man. Like I was talking to him on Thursday, and I was just like,
no,
I was like, what do you think? He's like, dude, I don't even. They haven't said anything to me. Like they didn't even come to me and tell me that like they were considering trading me or that they were shopping me. Like I haven't been told anything. He also is not on social media at all because he thinks that's better for his mental health. It's probably true today specifically, and so. He like was just kind of like, I'm just going to let it fall as it is. And I tried to like, we kind of talk like if somebody goes and gets you, at least somebody wanted you too. So think about it that way. Good guy. Hopefully he can stay healthy as he's got a lot of talent.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they knew exactly what they were going to do with planning Cooper at the team hotel over the weekend. So like that was already laid out.
And you know, and Nick Benito's been playing better. And so like you're in a decent spot.
John Ellis. Can he definitely become, that next level guy?
Exactly. He's been playing well. So like give your rookie some snaps. It makes sense.
Yeah. Do you know anybody else that called on anybody for the Broncos?
Teams are curious about Sutton. I think the price stayed high, to my understanding. I don't think you would want to do it, in all honesty. I think, we've seen a lot of guys that are from the previous era or whatever you want to call it head out the door, right? Like whether it's a Justin Simmons or a Tim Patrick or, other guys on this team. But Courtland, like, I still think you need a veteran receiver out of the group. I know there's a couple of other ones, say whether it's little Jordan Humphrey or Josh Reynolds, but like, I think the price stayed high on purpose. Like, if you want to pay this, cool. We have to do it, but we don't really want to give him away, or we don't want him to not be playing here. So I think some teams are curious on Court. There was not as many receiver deals as some teams thought to, or some people thought. So I think that might have played a part as well. I mean, Slayton didn't go anywhere, and Adam Thielen didn't go anywhere. So there were some other guys that both receivers in New England that teams were curious about, and KJ Osborne, and I'm trying to think who the other guy was. Their speedster escapes me right now. Tariq Tolman, I think. So yeah, I mean, not as many went as possible. Like the Chargers were maybe in play for receiver. I ended up wanting to stay with their rookie guys and have them play a lot, or rookie and second year guys to have them play a lot. So yeah, I think that was kind of it. It was kind of quiet, to my understanding, in all honesty. Yeah.
No, I agree. Usually you see like some big blockbuster thing, but no, it does feel like those happened over the offseason, right? Derrick Henry goes to the Ravens. It's like, well, there's the big blockbuster one.
Yeah.
At the straight deadline.
There, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, those were huge ones. I think the biggest ones outside of Marshawn Lattimore happened before the deadline. Like DeAndre Hopkins, Cam Robinson, those were massive deals. Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, like all of those things happened, long before the deal in the deadline. So like the big ones happened early.
Did the Jets really think, though, that just bringing in Devontae was going to change everything about that team?
Well, I think, like, all right, how many levers can I put in front of me? Like 1, 2, 3. It's like, all right, let's pull the one on the head coach. Let's pull the one on the play caller. Let's bring in the quarterback's best friend. There's talent there. There is.
Yeah.
I think Aaron Rodgers has not been what they hoped he would be at 40, which I think what we're really learning, in all honesty, because there's some comparisons. Like, what Brady did in Tampa is not like it's not
Mhm.
you can't replicate that. It's hard. It's really hard to do.
Yep.
He did bring a couple of his buddies down there with him, right? Gronk came, AB
Yep.
came, that blew up in their face. I was actually at that game when he was like running across the end zone, waving to everybody topless
Shirt off. He's
as he
like,
quit
see
the
y'all
team
later.
mid-game. Like, so that one didn't work out. But like there was already a really, really good team in place there that they built through the draft, honestly,
Mhm.
with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Vita Vea, and Antoine Winfield Jr. was an up-and-coming great draft pick. It's now one of the best safeties in football. Like, you had a lot of things in place. Levante David, like, Shaq Barrett for Broncos fans. Like, it was a good team already. And, it's hard to replicate that. The Jets tried. I don't think it's essentially working. We'll find out.
We will indeed find out. That's one where I'm like scratching my head every single time they make a move. Same with the Cowboys. Yesterday morning was honestly hilarious on social media with what Jerry Jones was doing. So it just makes me laugh. But it did give me a little bit of hope that, Sean Payton sees this team for what it is. And the fact that they are going to build through the draft. And I keep telling people, I'm like, it's a 2 to 3 year thing. Like, Bo looks good. Personally, I think Bo's the franchise guy. He's exceeded expectations for what I thought he would be this season for sure. And yes, there are tougher games ahead for sure. I mean, the Ravens was obviously such a brutal one, but now you have the Chiefs. And I still can't believe Patrick Mahomes jogged out of the injury tent on Monday night when everyone thought he went down for good. But
Superman.
It just feels like, Superman, right? And I go back to Sean Payton saying Superman's not walking through that door ahead of the trade deadline.
Yeah.
It feels like things are going in the right direction. So that should give Broncos country a little bit of hope of like, all right, let's build this team up from the ground up essentially and not just try and go get an easy fix, because that's what they've been doing at quarterback for years now.
Yep. I agree. And I mean, like, I don't want to sound too much like a broken record, but like, I thought this year was about like 5 guys going from being like, we're curious because we think there's potential, to being like legit players. Legit players. And I thought that was a big part of the growth in this year. And if for them to be competitive this year and for us to find out where they're headed after this season.
Yep.
I don't want to say sad part, but what has happened is most of those are on the defensive side of the ball. Almost all of them exclusively are on the defensive side of the ball outside of Bo, I would say, because you were wondering if Greg Dulcich is going to be that guy. Mike Evans is like, has me on the radio going, he's going to be a top 10 tight end. I was like, are you out of your mind? I didn't think he'd be inactive as a healthy scratch repeatedly, but like that was a guy that you were curious if he becomes a legit player, like a good NFL player. That's big. Tell me somebody else on defense that has happened to. There's still time. Does Devon Vele become that? Do we find that out of Troy Franklin? Do we find that out of Audric Estime? Do we find that out of somebody else on the offensive side of the ball? It doesn't look like it right now. But what we did find out, and why this team I think is where it's at, is like Zach Allen's a monster. Like, he was a good NFL player. He's a Pro Bowl, potential all-pro player right now. Jonathan Franklin Myers is a really, really, really good football player.
Agreed.
Jaquan McMillan is an outstanding nickel corner in this league. Riley Moss has been one of those guys that you were curious about and has taken a jump. And I think he's a very, very good NFL football player. So like, when we all talked about the 5 wins that the Broncos were slated to have, and they're going to exceed that this year, I think we hope they do, or else it's a abysmal second half of the season. What do they have? 5 now? But anyway, the reason I think they're better is I kept bringing that topic up, and we've seen it, but it's really exclusively to the defensive side of the ball. I think that those jumps have occurred with young players, coming into their own.
That's fascinating, because I also think, like, was Javonte Williams ever going to get back to his old self? And I feel like the question got answered on him. And it was like, is Courtland Sutton really going to be able to step up and be that wide receiver number 1 in the league? Like, yeah, he is it for the Broncos, but can he be that level here in the National Football League? So I totally see what you mean on the defensive side of things, but I feel like offensively too, there was a lot of question marks around a lot of guys' names.
There were. And we were hoping that someone made a jump. And who knows? Like, I mean, rookies all progress at different paces, right? Like, maybe one of these rookie wide receivers really, really becomes something. Maybe Audric Estime becomes something. Maybe, these are a lot of, maybes, but like maybe Javonte even needs more time. But I mean, it's a shame. That's a really, really talented football player that suffered a catastrophic injury. I think the offensive line has played pretty well. I think we kind of know what Court is, I think he deserves more balls, in all honesty.
He's got some great catches.
He has, and I think he's worthy of more targets because they're usually not picked off. They're not turnovers. He's not a 50-50 guy. He's like a 70-30 guy. He's a great red zone target. So yeah, I mean, that's the hard part. You're banking on some young players, and receiver as a young player is sometimes hard. There's a lot on your plate. It's very different than the college game. And some guys pick it up quicker, and some guys, it takes a minute.
Well, and I just go back to last year at this time, we were all so high on Marvin Mims Jr. Like, we were like, he's going to be that guy. And just the change in 1 year to now all of us are like, what the heck happened to him? Because anytime he's even getting targets, it's going, way over his head or anything of that nature. It just feels like it's not clicking anymore for him. And that was one of those names where I was like, oh, let's see what this guy's capable of.
I totally agree. I'm looking something up.
We love when James Palmer gets on his computer and goes,
because I'm looking at this, like, I wanted to look at draft history. So, like, I don't want Denver to be scarred by Jerry Jeudy. Drafting a receiver in the first round has a obscenely successful hit rate.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, the hit rate's really good. Like, let me see. Like, I'll go 2024 this year. Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas has been outstanding. Xavier Worthy's growing. Ricky Pearsall, obviously a little bit of a different situation. And Xavier Legette. Like, that's and then the first pick of the second round is Keon Coleman. And then Ladd McConkey. And Ladd's been playing outstanding. So most of those guys look like they're legit NFL players. 2023, Jackson Smith-Njigba was the first receiver taken in the first round at the 20th overall pick. I was just in Seattle. I watched him go crazy. He had, if two plays weren't called back, he had 180 receiving yards on Sunday. Quentin Johnston was the other one who I said they really, really like in LA. Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. These are players in the first round. 2022, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, sadly with the concussions, is brutal. Jameson Williams has had some off the field issues. But those are mostly hits. 2022, 2021, I'll stop after this one, I promise. Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Kadarius Toney, miss. But that's your hit rate's pretty high. Honestly.
Do you think they're scared to go draft a wide receiver?
I don't know. I don't know if they are. I think talking to Stoke all the time, they trade for T. Higgins, which T was not available for anyone. But you can get young wide receivers. I think it's a small hack to have rookie receiver contracts.
Yeah.
Kind of like quarterback. There's a lot of them. They come out very polished often. They can. And you can hit on some early. Malik Neighbors is outstanding. Brian Thomas Jr. is fantastic. How did LSU not win every game last year with Jaden Daniels and those two guys? But your chance of hitting is pretty good.
Yeah.
You just missed on Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah. I hope that they're not scared of it. But also, is that the biggest need in your eyes as a wide receiver for this team?
I think playmakers is probably the biggest need. I would say playmakers is probably the biggest need on this team. Defense is really, really solid, for sure. I'm curious what Garrett Bowles' future is. He's playing really well, but he's not really under contract moving forward. Mike McGlinchey's kind of locked in financially. But the O-line hasn't been bad. Playmakers in general, just get a playmaker. I think obviously tight end's a certain need, pass catching tight end. From that.
Do you think Lucas Cole can be that?
Yeah, maybe. You find out. You got to look at the other guys now, and now your chance to see if anybody's going to be that guy. But yeah, I think you need an alpha for sure. Give me a contender that doesn't have a legit number one alpha target.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy.
Nobody's doing it without
How many of them
one.
are tight ends too?
Yeah, you would say it's probably Kelsey still there. Terry McLaurin's maybe the most underrated receiver in football. He's outstanding as Jaden Daniels number one. Amon-Ra St. Brown's an all-pro. That's a legit number one. You need a number one to be one of these human. Justin Jefferson is a big reason why the Vikings are good.
Relevant, yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard to do it without a dominant pass catcher in some capacity.
Has Detroit become America's team?
I think they are. I do
too. I think everyone is rooting for them to go out there and do something this year.
Why not? Right? They're pretty likable. The post-game speeches are I wish Denver doesn't post their post-game speeches, do they?
No, but everyone keeps talking about these locker room celebrations and how I can like watch it on the social channels because it's setting off the fire alarms down there at Empower
Yeah,
Field.
they got like a dance party
Casino.
and lights and smoke and whatnot. You can have that. That's fine. It's cool. If the players love it, that's great. But like getting a chance to watch these like Dan Campbell speeches and then Jared Goff talking and giving the game ball back to, Dan Campbell. Like, I mean, this team's got something special in the locker room. They were built the right way through the draft with most of these players. And I think what makes them super likable, honestly, is you remember how they got Jared Goff. Like, that was a salary dump. Yeah. Like, he was included in the trade just because the Rams need to get rid of his salary. And now he's playing like an MVP. I think you root for a guy like that because second chances don't come in this league very often. It's
all about fit.
Yeah.
It's the NFL.
It really is. And I think there's a cultural change happening here in Denver. I really do. Like, I think players are buying in to what can be built here. Yeah. And it needs to start. And also, Detroit didn't do this in a day. Like, what did Dan Campbell do? Like, he lose like 10, 12 games in his first season or whatever. They started like 1-10 or something.
Yeah.
It took time to build what they did. I think Sean's building this in the right way, in the right direction with young players that are buying in for sure.
And I think people are buying into Bo Nix too, right? Your quarterback's going to be your leader one way or another. And I think that the team is starting to really buy into the rookie QB, which is obviously good. So there's plenty of good stuff on the
Your guy needs to be a gamer, and he's definitely that. I think we even saw that in the blowout loss in Baltimore. Like, he's a gamer. Like, he competes. Like, he'll put himself on the line to go out and make plays. And that goes a long way with teammates for sure.
That catch, I'm sorry. Like, he put himself out there, man.
Yeah, went up and like mossed somebody. Like, it was I mean, Court gave him a chance. And it's funny because I talked to Court this week and I was like, hey man, I want to talk to you about something like what makes a good 50-50 ball guy.
Yeah.
And Court's like, as the receiver, you got to do your 50. And I was thinking about that when he like threw it up and he's like, Bo, go do your 50. Go make your 50.
Court's getting charged too. I don't remember.
Oh yeah, he like jumped and got hit and it was a great play. Like, I think Bo's going to do anything he can. There was a great stat on The Athletic today. Bo Nix has 33 plays this season with his legs or his arm of more than 20 yards. You know the only player who has more this year?
Who?
Lamar Jackson.
Oh,
end of list. That's it.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I think he's been their explosive play a lot of times with his legs. But yeah, I think he's going out there and it's starting to work for him. I think it is. Like, and they're learning him and he's learning them. And I think it is headed in the right direction. I just want him to have some more pass catchers, some reliable pass catchers.
Yeah. Got to build the team around him. You found your guy, hopefully. Now let's build around him. It'll be interesting to see what happens the rest of the season. Of course, are you taking the Chiefs or are you taking the Broncos come Sunday?
I mean, like, how do you pick against the undefeated team in the league? I will say this. I'm really fascinated to see, because of the way the Chiefs are built up front. The Broncos, I mean, their center guard is best in football, with Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Joe Tooney. But their tackles are abomination. Can they get a lot of pressure from the edge on a Mahomes that's probably not going to be very healthy ankle-wise? And really just make life tough on him, hit him a couple times. I'm not going to be this guy, but I'll be this guy right now, Rachel. Get a flag, hit him late, like early, I mean, he's you can't really rattle him too much, but like do something, get after him a little bit. Yeah. And this is they have a good defense. So what can Bo do against that group? That's going to be a major test for him, major test. And can you contain Chris Jones? Major test for Denver at center. And at the interior portion of the offensive line. But I think the edge guys can create some havoc. And he's turned the football over. Like, last week was the first game he hasn't. So can you like, Justin Simmons always told me this before I go.
The king of picking off Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, who's done it more than anybody, right?
Yeah.
He's like, he will give you opportunities. Teams just do not capitalize on them as many times as you can. And he's like, and if you really, really capitalize on them and you get good field position out of them, like you can't foul them up. Denver needs to get 2 turnovers probably. Yeah. But their special teams are good. They're coached well. Like, beating them last year, I think changes the thought process a little bit. But I mean, Kansas City's tough. Like they're really tough. And so we'll see. It's there too, which doesn't help.
Yeah.
But I think the edge rushers have a chance to make a play or two because the tackles stink. And so we'll see.
Who can shine? That's going to be the question come Sunday. James Palmer, it is always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. I appreciate all of your knowledge, all of the inside chats that you have. Thank you so much for hanging with us.
Thank you, Rachel. Change that open. Okay. Thank you.
I'll try and add you in at some point. Don't you worry, my friend. All right. That is going to do it for us, though. We will see everybody tomorrow, 12 p.m. for another episode of Coffee Break. Bye, everybody.